What is up, everybody? Happy Tuesday training camp kickoff to you all as the Cincinnati Bengals have gathered both over the weekend and into this week to really kind of, I guess, put an official start on the 2025 season. I know there's a lot of different things in the offseason that's technically on the 25 calendar, but this kind of feels now the mock turtle soup luncheon, everything makes it feel like it is here. It's going to be a little bit of a different episode because we're going to start peppering you with a couple of different episodes if you aren't sick of us yet throughout the week, especially now that training camp, preseason, and the regular season are upon us. We're going to start peppering you with some different stuff. We kind of felt like instead of the kind of more deep dive analysis and, you know, player profiles and all the stuff we kind of do at this point in time, we're going to talk a little more headlines, because a lot of unique, and I don't think it's entertaining, but it provides some form of entertainment. Some unique things have been happening the past couple of days with the start of training camp, and there is no lack of drama with the Cincinnati Bengals yet again for training camp. So we're going to talk about a few different things here, run you through some major headlines, and then we're going to try and come back later this week. Hopefully have a special guest for you then too. We'll try and work on that. But I am Anthony. He is John. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe podcast network, also brought to you by Foco, Cincy Jungle, and some assistance from A to Z Sports. Speaking of A to Z Sports, John is killing it over there. John, oh boy, can you see the bags under my eyes? You're a harder worker than me. I mean, it's just like, whoa, man, what is going on? How are you doing?
Does it ever end? I don't think it does. No. We keep going. The wheel keeps spinning. The cycle keeps going. At least we got kind of football tomorrow, though. That's cool.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. Kind of football. Some on-field stuff. Guys checked in on, on Monday, Tuesday. The rookies were checking in over the weekend, that sort of thing. There are a number of things to talk about. Of course, there's the 800-pound Harambe in the room that we need to address with the contracts. We've got, I know, R.I.P. Harambe. We've got some new additions, and I know John is totally psyched about one of them. So we've got some new additions to the Bengals, some injury news, and of course, all kinds of interesting quotes from the man himself, Mike Brown, that was relayed to us by the great members of the local Cincinnati media, ranging from Ben Baby of ESPN, James Rapine, Mike Petralli. I don't want to leave anyone out. Kelsey Conway, Jay Morrison, a lot of great people. PDJ, they were all on top of it, and we're relaying. You know what's funny, John? And we'll get into the specifics that were kind of the quotes that were kind of said. You know what's funny to me is when, obviously X being the platform it is, you got to kind of, you don't paraphrase, you want to directly quote somebody, but it's kind of like one or two sentences that you directly quote normally. When it's Mike Brown, it is word for word like a monologue of all kinds of different stuff, because he rarely takes his time in front of the mic, and when he does, he just continues to provide, like I said, it's entertainment for some, it's frustrations for others. But I'll say this about the guy, man. He is who he is. He is who he has always been. He is authentic. And when he does get in front of the mics and is asked tough questions, he is polite in one respect, but he does not pull back on what he actually thinks about certain situations.
I mean, nor should he, because he only speaks for 10 minutes a year. and it's right in his home, right? So serving the same lunch for the last 30 years, mock turtle soup. But no, that was interesting what he said this earlier this week, and the ramifications, the potential ramifications of it, and where things actually stand based off of what he said. But yeah, we'll hear from him again, I guess, in 2026 to see if anything's changed.
Well, before we get to that, you have been to that luncheon and you've had the mock turtle soup. Is it good? You told us this one time. Is it just kind of meh? What's it like?
It's like the Bengals version of soup, where it's like it's not that bad. You want more out of it though, but it's like it lacks substance, but it's not terrible. It tastes better than it looks, I would say.
Okay, add some hot sauce to it or something,
Yeah.
And maybe yeah. Well, John, for the lack of better words, and for me, at the risk of sounding crass, we are looking at an old-fashioned pissing match here between a number of parties. The team, Trey Hendrickson and Shemar Stewart. That has kind of been the crux of it. We heard from Mike Brown at the luncheon, a little bit from Duke Tobin as well, and others. But unfortunately, the main points that were addressed at the media luncheon, as well as kind of the focus of all the questions, were centered around this, because this is where the controversy sits with Trey Hendrickson and Shemar Stewart. This is where we yet again are in the midst of some drama. And Paul Dehner Jr. put out a tweet earlier today that I think it was earlier today that kind of chronicled the last 5 or 6 years of drama heading into each training camp. And this one it's different, but it's not, because the drama is there. The Bengals and Trey Hendrickson have been working on a deal for trying to work on an extension. Reports are saying that Trey wants at least 2, probably 3 years, more guaranteed money, more money per year. And he has earned that based on his play, particularly last year. The Bengals, I guess, reportedly have, offered out a couple of other offers to him. He was in Cincinnati, and now that did not work out. And per his own social media, Trey Hendrickson is heading back to Florida, based on these things kind of going south and not really going anywhere.
It's been very cyclical over the last 6 months, where there has been some sort of either talks or progress with Trey, and then there may be an offer, maybe there isn't an offer, but then things don't go as planned, and then you hear from Trey the next day. And that's exactly what happened this time around. Mike Brown told reporters yesterday, with a sense of optimism, that, quote unquote, they're sharpening their pencils in the office and trying to hammer this deal done. And he spoke with a level of relative conviction about something getting done in the near future. I think that they looked at today, being Tuesday, the day the veterans reported to training camp, as a soft deadline to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And according to Trey, there were 2 offers that came in to him. The key here is that in previous attempts, they have only been 1-year extension offers, and 1 year without a lot of money. I think this time there were multiple years. The difference is Mike Brown and the Bengals thought that they could get Trey to sign a multi-year deal without any future guarantees, and Trey wasn't having it. And that's exactly what you said. Like, he didn't see the guarantees that he wanted, and that's why he's continuing this holdout, and he's not reporting to training camp. By the way, he's going to be fined $50,000 for every practice that he misses. The Bengals have to fine him that, and they can't rescind those fines. So that is just on the docket now. That is the path that Hendrickson is taking, because from the very start, he's wanted future guarantees. He couldn't even get future money because it was only a 1-year extension offer initially. The Bengals upped that to multiple years as their way of meeting in the middle. But I think that they felt some sort of delusional confidence that they could get Trey to cave the day before training camp, when the guy has been threatening to miss out, not training camp, the regular season. So I don't like... If yesterday was a serious offer to get him in, it wasn't serious. So I don't think that, based off of if the reports are true and the offer was multiple years without any guaranteed money, which is essentially a classic traditional Bengals extension offer, then it was never going to get the job done. And this feels like just a way to get to the eventual deal, which is some sort of future guarantees with multiple years that gets Trey back into the equation. And now they have 6 weeks to work that out. We reset the clock essentially, where training camp was the soft deadline. Now the firm deadline is week 1.
And again, with this comes the concerns of, okay, you figure, and there's been reports of Hendrickson, working out on his own, working out in Cincinnati with I think, what was it, Sam Hubbard and a couple of others at some point too. So I mean, you're pretty confident he's remaining in shape, but with practice reps and preseason reps, however limited those may be, you get the opportunity to get into game shape, that sort of thing. And that's where this 6 weeks becomes extremely valuable. To your point as well, I don't think you explicitly said this, but there's also the risk of injury this time of year. And without this thing being done the way that, or at least close to what Trey is asking for, he feels that it is not worth the risk to participate, at least in the foreseeable future, without this thing being ironed out. I will say that the comments by Bengals leadership about this situation were, and granted, it didn't end positively as of Tuesday afternoon, evening, but they were a little bit more kind-hearted than, say, their rookie and the representation that he is holding at this point in time. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But this is now, dominating the headlines, and it unfortunately is overshadowing the other, 2 big deals that they did with their wide receivers this year. You also kind of felt, as we talked about on the show late last week, you also kind of felt like, okay, TJ Watt got the extension. There's talks with George Karlaftis and the Chiefs and that sort of thing. You kind of feel like, okay, more and more dominoes are kind of starting to fall, where this is the framework again, more and more clear that this needs to fall into for a guy like this. And the Bengals seemingly are not budging as of this point. And I don't know if Trey is thinking that he has more leverage because of the Shemar Stewart situation, just because of depth purposes at the edge position and that sort of thing. But it definitely isn't hurting his stance. But this is just kind of getting uglier and uglier. I'm going to share a couple quotes with folks here from a couple of NFL insiders. Jordan Schultz said the Bengals an all-pro defensive end. Hendrickson made attempts over the past few days to re-engage on a new deal, but talks failed to gain serious momentum. Both sides are dug in and frustrated. I'm told there are key differences between the two sides. And then Diana Rossini, who I believe is with The Athletic, if I'm not mistaken, just spoke to Bengals pass rusher Trey Hendrickson, who is currently in Jacksonville, Florida for the last 30 days. He had been at his home in Cincinnati in training, but as training camp approached, he and his wife decided to leave. They received 2 offers, and then there was basically, it wasn't to what Hendrickson was wanting, and there was some sort of allusion to the fact of he didn't want to be around to be a distraction to his teammates, and also, personally speaking, he didn't want to hear the training camp whistles and all that kind of stuff that would maybe pull at his heartstrings a little bit. So, I mean, this is where this is right now, and like you said, with this kind of soft deadline being right into training camp, you kind of felt like, okay, the urgency needs to be there. It's going to get done. And it did not. And so now what happens? Now, does this just get further contentious? Does one side finally budge? I don't know, but this has now been an albatross hanging over the team in an offseason that should be largely celebrated because of the extensions to Chase and Higgins.
We know that and I want to keep harping on the fact that they were at a 1-year offer, and then they went to multiple years. And I think, to your point, when Watt got a 3-year extension, Karlaftis got one as well, but I think he might be another bucket considering he's considerably younger.
Younger, yeah,
right. The vast majority of his contemporaries at the position have gotten multi-year deals, aside from Danielle Hunter, who's kind of like an outlier in this case. I think that forced the Bengals to get to that point. But if you're Trey and you're 30 years old and you've been playing essentially on, pay-as-you-go type of seasons, because he's only gotten guaranteed money back in 2021 and 2023 when he signed those 2 deals, a multi-year extension without any future guarantees is essentially just a 1-year deal at this stage in his career, and that's just not what he's after. So again, I just don't understand why the Bengals thought that they could get this done without giving him the one thing that he's been pounding the table for 4 years now. So that's just where my head is at this point. And it just seems like this seemed to be inevitable to go into training camp. And I guess good on Trey for not doing the Jamar Chase thing where he's just in a hat every day and just like the cameras are on him and all the attention is on him, out of sight, out of mind, all that stuff. So like if you're threatening to miss games, then you're probably going to just take the $50,000 per day fines and miss training camp at this point. And maybe the Bengals hold it over him as a way to be like, hey, recuperate some of this money by just signing the best deal possible. But I don't think anyone really knows when this is going to end. We just know that September 7th is going to be circled in bright red.
Yeah. Alan says Trey is dug in, and we had one from G. Lou that said, I heard it's stuck on guaranteed money. Yeah. I mean, I think that's now the big deal now that the Bengals maybe reportedly come up on the multi-year thing. Pastor Dave Hammond says Brown seems to be an offensive lover, not realizing defense is the very key to success for this team. This has always been, we talked about this when the Bengals have let certain players walk key pieces of the defense, be it has been, it feels like more frequently on defense, but also positions that they just value far less. And you can look at Kevin Zeitler and Jesse Bates in recent history for, no other, no bigger examples really of that. And you now look at what they did on offense, extending their quarterback and 2 wide receivers. This has always been what the preference by the Brown family. They value skill positions. They value offensive skill positions, and they do use high draft capital at edge rusher, cornerback, that sort of thing. But the big mega extensions have largely come to their quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and premier offensive tackles. So that, I mean, I'm kind of painting with a broad stroke here, but I think we can kind of look at some past history and, pick out a number of instances that plays into Pastor Dave Hammond and what he said there. But let's pivot to Stewart, because this got pretty ugly Monday. And it wasn't just from the Bengals. It was from his agent representation, Stewart's agent representation. So let's just talk about this. Duke Tobin was asked, he being Shemar Stewart, is listening to the advice that he's paying for. I don't understand the advice. I don't agree with it. I'm not the one paying for it, but that's where it is. Stewart's agent, Zach Hiller, said, quote, Duke Tobin has no involvement in this negotiation. Quote, it seems to be above his pay grade. And I think Hiller had told I can't remember if that was Ben Baby at ESPN or who that was at ESPN. But I want to properly credit that. So, so obviously that's one just major issue. And it's not just, hey, we're working on it, we're trying to come together. I mean, now these are open, open shots to each side at this point. It's got shades of Andre Smith and then some all over it. And now this is getting worse before it's getting better. There was rumors, I think late last week or over the weekend, that Stewart was working out with Texas A&M, and might he find his way back on the Aggies roster and all this kind of stuff. I mean, this is just getting ridiculous. And then you have Mike Brown basically explaining a bit more of his position, saying, I mean, something to the effect of, I don't want to be paying a guy if he's in prison. And I mean, it's just like going, where are we going with this? I mean, how did we get here? And again, we go back to when this first started. If it is about disciplinary issues or something, was there something that stuck out to this team in the pre-draft process, or something that made them say, this guy has some sort? And granted, other teams, we've talked about this on the show, other teams have put this specific language in some of their contracts for higher picks and that sort of thing. But was there something specific about this player that made them want him to be that precedent that they want to set? because when Mike Brown is talking about paying a guy when he's in prison or not doing things the right way or this, that, and the other thing, yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to connect those dots, honestly.
So they made it very clear throughout talking about it that they have nothing against Stewart. Like
Right.
they like effusively praised him as a person, as a player, someone that they want in the building. They made it very clear that the enemy in their eyes is obviously his agent, and it's always interesting when Tobin uses those select words, and then you're like, oh, is Mike Brown going to say something similar? And then he called it the whole thing foolishness, which is
Love it. I
classic
mean, that's
classic
88,
90-year-old billionaire.
yeah, I was gonna say 88-year-old man speak. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, like it was interesting because we haven't heard anything from their side about this since it all began. We've only heard it from obviously Hiller going through various avenues and channels of getting this messaging out, and it's only been coming from his side. And Tobin was extremely defensive about the idea of, oh, so other teams are allowed to evolve with their contracts, but the Bengals aren't. And that I think resonated a lot with people in terms of like, oh, like this is just them wanting to establish a new precedent, which has been reported for several months now, right? Like that's been the whole thing. They're just trying to change the language just going forward. And I think it was interesting how a lot of people then took that and said, hey, you're trying to evolve in this way, but you're not willing to evolve in other ways in terms of maybe including some guaranteed money for your players, which may be a double standard there here and there. But it seemed very clear that like everything that we kind of assumed was basically confirmed, that it's not necessarily anything to do with Stewart himself. This is just a change that they decided to make now. And he just happens to be the guy who has to deal with it first. And there has been more stuff coming out about Zach Hiller, who represents James Cook, who's also in a contract snafu with the Buffalo Bills. He used to represent Zay Flowers until Flowers dropped him. So like there's been some things here and there with Hiller and his time as an agent in this league. And there was even something from before the draft. I think Todd McShay reported about it for the Ringer right before the draft about how Stewart's agent is kind of rubbing people the wrong way in league circles, and how, you know, he wouldn't allow Stewart to work out for some teams in terms of private workouts, and there was always just some weird, mysterious stuff going on there. So we don't really know. It's a lot of speculation, but it is interesting to start to connect those dots and see if what Stewart is being told is actually what's best for him. Because I understand not wanting to take a deal that's structured a different way compared to past first round picks, but at the end of the day, it's far from the end of the world because the money is the same. And so long as you just, you know, keep your head down and work, like you're going to get it. So I understand wanting a concession for changing this precedent, which it doesn't seem like the Bengals are going to do, because we all know that they just dig in and they don't want to give up anything. But at the same time, it seems very clear that like the Bengals are not budging here, and Stewart just doesn't have a lot of leverage here.
It's just so odd to me from both sides, because this seems to be centering around, disciplinary and conduct, player conduct language, and guaranteeing that money to the player should something in the event of a legal matter happen. You have Mike Brown, like I said, mentioning not wanting to pay a guy if he's in prison or something like that. And then, like you just brought up, you have Shemar Stewart saying, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Well, why aren't you just saying to yourself out loud, well, I'm not planning on getting in any legal trouble. I'm not planning on doing anything. I mean, I'm going to use this money responsibly, or what? Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like this weird dichotomy about this disciplinary issue where it's almost like I understand why player conduct, especially given what the Bengals went through in the early parts of the Marvin Lewis era with all those guys getting arrested and all that kind of stuff. But it just seems to me like, all right, well, they're dug in here. I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm going to bet on myself, and that's that, right? I mean, this is just a really, really odd thing that has become seemingly incredibly contentious. And the back and forth between Hiller and Duke Tobin is like, I couldn't believe what was transpiring on Monday, quite honestly.
That really sticks out to me because it seems like Hiller is doing everything but trying to find a solution. Like he's just trying to make
Yeah.
sure that his messaging is out as much as possible, and he's talking more to us than maybe the team. And yeah, like there is the fact of I do get it from a sense of like you don't want to take away like I'm definitely pro player in a lot of senses, and you don't want a lot of restrictions in some of these contracts. But it would be one thing if this was completely unique around the league, but it's not. It's actually very standard, and that's been known for several weeks as we've known about this language. So again, it's not like the Bengals are doing anything egregious here. It just happens to be them starting and catching up with what other teams are doing, and who knows what other changes that can follow from that. But yeah, the longer that Stewart doesn't sign this, the worse it looks from his perspective about what are his actual intentions. And I don't want to put anything on him. It's just reckless speculation. But the longer that this prolongs, the worse it looks from him. And it sucks for him because he's just a kid and he's listening to people that he's paying for, and he's listening to people who are older than him. I don't know what's going on in the circle, but it hurts me to see him being villainized in this way when he's just trying to do what he thinks is right. And unfortunately,
and best for him.
Yeah, he may look back on this and regret it, and I worry about that.
I do too. I will say, I think if Shemar Stewart was in a Trey Hendrickson-ish situation, a George Karlaftis situation where he had been in the league a handful of years, and then the Bengals were trying, and he, had been performing and not getting into trouble off the field, all that kind of stuff, then I could see where this could be a legitimate gripe going, where is this coming from? But this is a guy, again, that, like you said, it's in a lot of contractual language in the league for young players, rookie contracts, that sort of thing. And he has not played a snap of professional football. And so the Bengals are attempting to protect themselves. Again, I don't want to villainize one side, but I do think, like you said, the Bengals are being extremely stubborn about it, and maybe they feel rightfully so. And probably what they're hoping is going to transpire is what happened with T. Higgins, in that there's going to be an agent change and something's going to happen to get this across the finish line. But right now, we didn't want to keep belaboring this, but right now the Bengals, Trey Hendrickson and Shemar Stewart, continue to be in an impasse with their contracts, and we'll see how far this goes into summer. I hope we don't have to keep talking about this stuff. I remember talking about the Bates and the franchise tag and T. Higgins and all this stuff throughout summer. I hope this doesn't dominate the headlines, but it deserves to, given the star power of Hendrickson and the high draft stock of Shemar Stewart. So and this is, John, with all the holdouts, the Bengals, first round holdouts the Bengals had over the years, these are critical days and weeks coming up here for a rookie defensive lineman that didn't have a lot of statistical production in a lot of different senses. These are important days and weeks to be here and to learn the playbook and to be around your teammates and to get into that kind of close to game shape thing. So it is a shame that he's not here, right, or not in Cincinnati right now participating.
And what's going to happen is if his rookie season doesn't pan out the way that he wants to, I'm sure he and his camp are going to point to, what's going on is the reason why. And then the other side's going to be, well, we could say the same thing. So it's there are no winners right now. The Bengals aren't winning. Stewart isn't winning. It just looks bad for both sides. And this is why these holdouts are rare, because nothing good comes out of it.
Yeah. And at some point, I mean, I've negotiated different business contracts, not sports contracts, but ones that have a decent amount of money at stake. And at some point you just say, are we going to make this deal come together and make it work, or are we not? And we can work together on this and get as close as what we both want as possible, or not. And unfortunately, you've got two sides that are sticking to their guns right now. And, both sides feel they're right. And that's where it is right now. The Bengals did make, on a positive note, this is going to be something that I know, John, I'm surprised John isn't jumping out of the seat right now. His boy, Desmond Ridder, makes his glorious return to Cincinnati, along with a handful of other players. Another notable one, Taven Bryan, a guy that, I think the Bengals, he was kind of linked a little bit in first round talks a handful of years ago as a possibility when they took Billy Price as maybe a guy they look at. He ended up going a little later in that first round, I think towards the end of the first round, 29 overall or something like that. So he makes his return. That to me, just that one screams Bengals classic late free agency signing, a first round pick that hasn't lived up to expectations, has flashed here and there, but can be a good depth piece. Maybe you have a little bit of a career renaissance on a friendly rental deal type of thing. But the Bengals making some moves. Former Bearcat and local star Desmond Ridder makes his comeback to Cincinnati and gets added to that quarterback room behind Joe Burrow and Jake Browning. You got Taven Bryan. I've got there's a few others I want to get there, but that's where I kind of want to start. And with you, I think we maybe did we talk about Ridder coming out of the draft? Maybe we did a draft profile on him. I have to go back and look, but I know you know a lot about him. So roster chances. He's played and started NFL games. I don't know. What do you think here?
Well, my first thought was I saw the notification on my phone that Desmond Ridder signs, and I didn't see the team. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's cool. And I saw the notification, like the Bengals. They're like, they had 5 quarterbacks in that room now. So my initial thought was, who is hurt? Because they already had 4, and like Ridder, obviously, like you said, has starting experience. So it seemed like a decent deal for him to come in here, but he just ended up taking the spot of Logan Woodside. So that was just the Bengals being aggressive to find an upgrade over their original quarterback 3. You would like them to be aggressive in maybe some other spots, but that's what they decided to do. They sought a guy who has known Zach Taylor for 8 years now, 9 years now, because Zach Taylor recruited Ridder to come to UC when Taylor spent his 1 year as offensive coordinator for the Bearcats. He comes from Louisville, Kentucky, went to a pretty decent high school there, was only a 3-star recruit, though, coming out of college. As far as UC quarterbacks, in my time being a fan, he wasn't my favorite, but I do appreciate the player that he eventually developed into being in 2021. Obviously, the Bearcats went to the college football playoff that year, and they would not have been able to do so if Ridder didn't improve to be the player that he was that year, because it took him some time to really round into a relatively consistent quarterback. Because in his early years, I wasn't the biggest fan of him. I thought he really limited the Bearcats offense, to be quite honest with you. But again, I thought his accuracy and his anticipation got a lot better, and that's why he ended up going in the 3rd round. But there were definitely some drawbacks to him as a player. I think there was still a lot of inconsistencies with his mechanics, with his footwork, and that's why he didn't exactly do the best as a full-time starter with the Atlanta Falcons. And, 3rd round pick, it's hard for not everyone's going to be Dak Prescott in that situation. So, just making it that far and being a starter and getting yourself out there, like that was great enough to see for a Bearcats quarterback. Then he got traded to the Cardinals last year, got cut, made the practice squad. The Raiders signed him, and then the first game that he plays, it's against the Bengals, in that crazy blowout game last year when Jermaine Purdy didn't play. Yes, he threw a touchdown, but obviously that game was far and over. I don't know if that tape had anything to do with him coming in now, but I do think that this was Zach Taylor knowing this quarterback from a long time ago, liking him as a person, obviously wanting him to, come to Cincinnati. Obviously, he didn't coach him because he left for the Rams by the time Ridder got there. So this is 8 years in the making of Taylor finally getting to coach Ridder, even if it's only for the next 6 weeks, because I don't foresee him giving Jake Browning a true test. They seem pretty adamant about saying Browning is the backup, Ridder is QB3. I think they just want to establish that those roles, but we've seen wackier Augusts, right? Like, I don't think it was pretty assumed that, Trevor Siemian was going to be the backup here in 2023, and then Jake Browning won that competition. So you never know how these things go.
Yep. And he does bring mobility to the position. He can bring some scrambling ability, which obviously will provide some excitement. I expect him probably to get a lot of extensive preseason work, and he'll probably, my guess is he'll probably perform pretty well in the preseason against, 3s and 4s and that sort of thing. But I mean, it is a little exciting to get, the Bengals have explored that before. I remember Tony Pike had a small stint with the Bengals and that sort of thing. So, I mean, they've kind of gone here before, but it is a devil they know, and a pretty good devil in a lot of different ways. So that was the main one, as well as Taven Bryan, who is in his 8th year. He was a first-round pick from the Jags in 2018, as I mentioned. He has 154 tackles, 24 tackles for loss, and 11.5 sacks in his career. The Bengals also signed free agent center Andrew Rame, who's a second-year player out of Oklahoma. He was a college free agent signee of the Carolina Panthers last year. They also signed defensive tackle McTelvin Agam, who's 6'3", 300. Agim, sorry. Third-year player out of the University of Arkansas, and he was a third-round pick out of the Broncos a handful of years ago. So not many stats to his name, but another depth piece along that defensive line. And all of a sudden they got two defensive tackles after not really going that route. We talked about that the other night, that they didn't really go that route in the draft. So they did make some signings here going into training camp at that position. They did waive guard to Sean Manning, who was a first-year player, was on the practice squad last year. And then, of course, coinciding with the Desmond Ridder signing, Logan Woodside was released. Logan Woodside is just a guy that keeps returning to the Bengals in one form or another. So another local guy that the Bengals have had around for a little bit, but they are sticking with Ridder for depth purposes, at least throughout the summer. And then related to that, the Bengals have some injury news. BJ Hill, Dax Hill, cleared to practice, if I'm not mistaken on that one. So that's good news there. Unfortunately, Zach Moss and predictably Eric All at this point are pup candidates, and that they'll have to monitor what's going on there. I don't know when we're going to see Eric All. Obviously flashed quite a bit as a rookie, just in a handful of games. And go back and listen to our interview with him last summer. Just a heck of a young man. And we hope his recovery goes well, as with Moss as well. But so the Bengals have a little good news, bad news there with a handful of players on the injury front.
Right. So, I mean, BJ Hill, I think his injury came sometime earlier in the offseason. He wasn't really participating in OTAs, and I think he may have been limited during minicamp, but regardless, it wasn't very much. So he's cleared to practice, but he's going to be on kind of like a pitch count, as is Dax Hill, at least for the start of training camp. And that's where I think you had not one, but two defensive tackles getting signed to the roster. Also, Dante Barnett, who was the International Player Pathway Program player, he got waived, I think, to make room for Brian and Agim. So they got 8 defensive tackles now. I think it's a direct response to what happened to the group last year when it got decimated by injuries this time during training camp. So take it easy for BJ Hill as he's kind of getting reacclimated. Yeah. And this just gives Agim and Brian just chances to flash on tape in the preseason. Maybe if they don't make the roster, get a chance to latch on to someplace else. I guess with Brian, like I thought he was a little bit overhyped in the pre-draft process back then.
I did too.
And he was always kind of just like, he's since then he's been just kind of like a rotational pass rusher who can get pressure here and there, but not someone that you want to necessarily rely on in some of those crucial snaps. But they don't have a lot of pass rushing juice in general in the group. So I think he found a team where if something clicks in the next couple of weeks, maybe he can make a name for himself. Maybe he can convince the team to keep 5 defensive tackles, because right now with so much uncertainty at defensive end, you don't really know how the composition of those two are going to go. But I think it's interesting for both him and Agim, who I think was a better college player than he's ended up being in the pros. He's basically hardly played in the regular season for any of the teams he was on, but I was a fan of him coming out of 2020. So, you know, see what he can do, right? So it just gives them depth. It gives them options at that spot, because every year that position gets decimated with injuries, or it's very much in danger of going through all that attrition. So it gives them options, gives them depth, so they don't have to rush back BJ Hill. And as for Dax Hill, they didn't really make any moves at cornerback. It seems like he's pretty much good to go, but they want to also be precautious about him too, because despite him being young and an elite athlete, it was still, you know, a ligament injury last year, so they don't want to rush him back. But it seems fairly optimistic that he is cleared to play, and they didn't bring in any contingencies at cornerback. So they seem to be pretty confident that he's going to be ready to go by the time the preseason is here.
I'm sure he'll be on a pitch count as well, in terms of you may see him, you know, day off and come back in or that sort of thing, at least as things progress. But we hope things go well in the recovery, continue to go well, hopefully, with the recovery of Zach Moss and Eric All. So that's kind of some of the news and notes there. The Bengals are going to get set. We'll be seeing all kinds of different practices and continue to monitor things. I actually kind of do think Brian, if he plays well, does have a decent shot at making the roster, because of like what you said, there's just not too much interior pass rushing juice in that spot. And they need a guy, even if he's comes in rotationally and, if they mix up the fronts, that sort of thing, he could be a guy that, is a third down player or that sort of thing on game days and still get you the occasional play and just have some depth in that way that they did not have at most parts of last year.
Someone asked me on Twitter, I think it was ST Palmy, who's a good follow. He asked me if Brian is going to have more production this year than Sheldon Rankins. And I honestly didn't really have the answer for him. I just said no, just because I don't know if he's going to make the team or not, but man, what a line that would be.
Yeah. Wow. That's a fantastic question, but anything else you want to touch on or get to before we hop out of here? And we'll have another episode later this week, but we really wanted to kind of cycle through, and we went a little longer than we wanted to, but we really wanted to cycle through some of the major headlines as training camp is kicking off. And, obviously a lot of stuff happened Monday, and it wasn't even on-field stuff. It was a lot of going back and forth, comments back and forth between different parties.
I think, though, one thing we did mention, Seth McLaughlin, who's also on the NFI list, obviously suffered a torn Achilles at Ohio State last year in November. So it's only been, 8 months since then. So he's not quite ready to practice yet, which is why Andrew Ryan, like you mentioned, is here as the third string center. So I would imagine once McLaughlin gets cleared, he just takes the place of Ryan. And maybe that I would assume that him not being able to start training camp initially kind of puts him behind the 8 ball if there was ever going to be a competition for the backup center spot with Matt Lee. There's talks about Matt Lee now being 310 pounds and maybe going into right guard, but I think that's entirely speculation. But speculation ends officially tomorrow, Wednesday, when they are on the practice field for training camp for the first time. It's about time.
It is about time, and hopefully the contract drama will be short-lived, although not looking that way at this point. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in live. Thanks for tuning in after the fact. This has been the Orange and Black Insider, a little bit of a 2025 training camp kickoff episode, going through the headlines of what's happening with the team. Of course, you can get this show, if you like the audio side of things, on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel with our show, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, talking football with Bengal Jim and friends, as well as Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach, Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz, both great follows on X as well. So go follow them, as if the others weren't either, but go follow them on X. And of course, if you like the video side of things, if you like our YouTube channel, you can subscribe to that underneath John's side of the screen by that Cincy Jungle icon, our show icon, the Orange and Black Insider. Click that. Click the subscribe button and give us a like if you wouldn't mind. We appreciate that. Give a like to the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. Keep it to cincyjungle.com and A to Z sports.com for your Bengals news. And of course, our thanks to FOCO, the fans only company. Go to foco.com and check out the Bengals exclusive merchandise that they have there. We've got some exciting announcements coming up here in the next couple of weeks too, in terms of some different collabs and other things we've got coming. Can't quite spill the beans yet, but we're pretty excited about it. We'll let you know about that. But hey, we just appreciate all of you tuning in. I know it's a little late for some of you out there if you're tuning in live. If not, get it on your favorite streamer. We appreciate all of you. We'll be back later this week with another episode, and we'll be continuing our Bengals training camp coverage throughout the summer. John, take care, buddy. We'll chat soon.
Peace out.